today it's my pleasure to speak to Elisabeth MacHale. Elisabeth, where are you based?
I am currently based in Dubai.
And originally you're from Ireland?
I'm from Ireland originally. I've been here for the past 10 years. And then in between, I was sort of outside Ireland in Europe, in the UK and in Belgium. Then I moved back to Ireland before coming to Dubai 10 years ago.
So what was actually your first ever job?
I was very fortunate with my career. I always knew I wanted to work in fashion. And my first job, while it took a little while after college to get it, because there was a recession at the time, I got a design job that was based in a factory. And when I joined, I realized how little I knew about working in the fashion industry. So while I knew how to design and how to create tech packs and how to make product and cut patterns, it's a very different thing when you're landed in the factory and having to deal with machinists and think about production and understand costings. But it was a really great learning ground. It opened me to Premier Vision, which I had never been to, but then I got the opportunity to go there, which is one of the world's largest fabric fairs. And that's where everyone comes to be inspired and look at the fabrics for the new season. So that was my first role. And it was great. I learned so much. And I also learned, I was working with a particular buyer, one of our customers, who really inspired me, I think, to follow the journey into buying eventually. But I really admired how she worked. And she was really great in terms of a customer with a designer, especially a young designer, in guiding me. And it's really important when you're a designer to make sure that you're getting an accurate brief from your client or your customer. The more detailed that can be, the better job that you can do as a designer. And it's important that you understand what they want. So yeah, that was a really great start. I was very lucky.
So looking at your current role and what you're doing now, what is it that defined the role for us, and how did you come to this specific stage in your life?
So I set up my own company, a consultancy, a fashion business consultancy in Dubai 5 years ago. And I've been really fortunate to work with some great retail organizations in this region. And I work with them in different ways. It depends on what their requirements are, but mostly it is looking at their business, looking for opportunities and how to grow their business. And whether that is, working to train the buyers or designers in another way, to upskill them, or to look at their product categories, how they're developing their product, how maybe their designs can be improved, how are they doing their range plans, how are they assigning their quantities for their product, and also how are they, for example, with the designers, where are they doing their research? While the COVID pandemic did move everyone online, as you said, sometimes you can't actually beat actually going to shops and looking at the market and feeling product and understanding it. Having said that, working online as well, you have so much more access to information. It's fantastic. But I have worked in the fashion industry for over 20 years. And as I said, I started in a design role in a factory before moving to a design role eventually in CNA in Belgium. And there I was working in head office, and that really exposed me to what it was like to work as a designer with buyers as part of that team. And you should also understand, as a designer in these environments, you're really a commercial designer and you're not designing what you like. You've really got to understand your customer. And that applies for someone working in a retail organization or someone setting up their own fashion brand. You've really, really, really got to understand who your target customer is. From there, I moved back to Ireland and moved into my first buying role. And when I look back on this was probably my favorite part of my career, because at that time I was designing product and also buying it. And that for me is where it really starts to make sense, because, designing product without a budget is just a hobby. But having numbers against your product, well, for young designers who are designing and they're not thinking about their budget or thinking about what their retail price is going to be, or not understanding their costs, and I've come across that quite a lot. You've really got to understand how the numbers work against the product and vice versa.
So what advice would you give someone that would like to, as you said, so many people have been asking you during your career, what advice would you give to those who follow in your footsteps?
I think the first thing is, if you want to be a really great buyer, like go from good to great, you need a lot of curiosity. You have to have a curiosity about your product, about your customer, about fabrics, about when you're working with suppliers, about what they do. I would always say, be open to learning. You need to get a lot of training. Unfortunately, I think some people maybe expect to be a buyer overnight. They come into the office and say, yeah, I should be traveling to Asia next week. And it doesn't happen that quickly. If you have an opportunity to join a buying office at a junior level, whether it's an administration buyer's assistant, that's the time to really start learning, understand how the buyers work, and do what you can. Be really a great team player and learn as much as you can. And the responsibility will start to come. Be open-minded and willing to learn. And also then once you start becoming a buyer and are assigned a budget, to trust your instincts as well.
Looking at that advice, what has been the best advice that someone has given you?
It's not necessarily what someone has given me, but I guess it's what I've learned along the way. And the fashion industry is quite small. So, I would say don't burn bridges. Be careful of burning bridges, and because you will always come across people who will have moved companies, or even with suppliers. Be careful of your reputation.
You even work for the same company, we didn't know.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Well, I think our timing didn't overlap, but yeah, it's a really small world. And for junior buyers, I think be very careful about how you work with your suppliers. Build a partnership rather than, you versus them, and, cancel orders at last minute without thinking about the impact that's going to have on that business. That could destroy a business somewhere if you don't really understand what their challenges are. That's why I would always recommend visiting the supplier, understand where they're coming from, their challenges, particularly if you're sourcing from Asia and you're based in Europe. It's a very different world, whether it's India or Bangladesh or China, and you need to understand how things operate. I remember one time, one of the girls on the team I was working with was shouting down the phone at a supplier, telling them to take the goods off the container. And I think the supplier was based in Hong Kong at the time. And shortly after, I was due to visit Hong Kong, and I specifically took a photograph of the port in Hong Kong where the containers are piled high. Like, it is enormous. So can you imagine trying to find this needle in a haystack? Once the goods go onto a container, there is no coming off the container. So it's those sort of things, those bits of knowledge that you learn on the job that are probably just as important.
Elisabeth, it was such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. And
my pleasure. I hope what I've shared today will be of help to your customers.